Hello there folks, and welcome back to another Tale from the Wood Library. Now today we're going to look at trying to give a new lease of life to an old hand drill. This is just a $10 hand drill. It's pretty good, an impact driver. It's got used a lot in the past, but for probably 5 or 6 or 7 years it's just been sitting collecting dust in the bottom of a cupboard. And I'm sure a lot of people have got similar things because of course there are far better drills on the market. I now use Ryobi drills with 18 volt rechargeable batteries, lithium batteries, which are just brilliant. So the idea is to actually take off the backboard off this planer stand that I've made from scrap pine and insert the drill. So it's a permanent circular disc sanding attachment. And what we're looking at here is trying to work out how much support we need to give to the drill, basically how to fix it onto the board so it doesn't jump around when I start sanding with it. So I've got a couple of blocks of scrap wood about the same thickness as that backboard. I'm just working out the size of the hole to drill and whether it can clear the chuck, because of course that's really important once we've got the little sanding disc installed. So if the chuck doesn't stick out of the back of the trolley there too much, if it doesn't stick out enough, it's going to be impossible to take that disc off and replace it with anything else. So that was really important. That's probably fundamental to the success of this particular exercise. And I didn't want to get into extending it using bearings or anything like that. So the next step was to cut up a couple of planks of very cheap junk pine wood. Again, this has been rescued off a pallet. It's a reasonably good condition. It's got a few nail holes. And most of my projects, if I'm just doing stuff around the workshop, I'm not going to bother cleaning it up and filling the nail holes, etc., etc. It's good to go as it is. So then I cut 3 rectangles for some old MDF that's been knocking around the shop for a number of years, and very carefully penciled around the outside of the drill and then spent the afternoon cutting it out with a jigsaw and a chisel and a number of other tools. I think eventually a hammer got brought into play there, so that once screwed together they form this kind of cutout into which I can drop the drill. Now it's pretty difficult because the first time I tried, of course, each of these 3 templates were slightly different. The drill wouldn't fit in, but after a lot of fiddling around and bashing with the chisel and persuading it with a sander and a number of other tools, managed to get it to fit quite nicely. So then I thought I'd modify and cut up the 2 baseboards, cutting here a slot to accommodate the underside once it's mounted underneath my thicknesser planer table. Once it was under there, I really need to get it to slot into the 2 rear legs. And I just need to tidy up a little bit. Most of the marks on this timber is actually not made by myself. These are marks made in, wherever in China these pallets are knocked up or the products packaged. The next step, of course, was to figure out the diameter of the front of the drill. That's the drill that I'm mounting on my platform there. And it turned out to be a 40 millimeter hole. So I drilled a 40 mil hole in the backboard, and here I'm screwing the first panel of the base that supports the drill and the MDF blockwork onto the backboard. And there it is, basically gluing and sitting down there looking reasonably okay. Put another backboard on there, so we've got 2 planks together. And the idea there, of course, is rather than getting too fancy with doweling links and everything like that, I thought I'd just screw a couple of pieces MDF and glue and screw them onto this baseboard. It's not supporting a huge amount of weight, and I thought that would probably do okay. The next step was, of course, to actually wiggle around and get the block board here, the block of MDF, in the right position so that the chuck actually protrudes at 90 degrees. And to do that, I had to wiggle it around a little bit, so you can see it's not square on the baseboard, but that doesn't matter. I just put a 10 millimeter hole either side through the MDF and the baseboard and dropped into coach bolts that's essentially going to hold it in there. There's a bit of play in there, so you wiggle around until we get it pretty much square out the front, or should I say the back. The next stage was to create some sort of little short offcuts here, just cut them up and use these to create a holder for the work rest. And here's the work rest just being trimmed up. And I use a 1 litre paint can as a little trick, just to draw around, get nice smooth round corners. Although this is not going to look a beautiful piece, I thought, well, I might as well sand it up and get it looking nice and smooth just to avoid splinters among other things. So that's the work rest going in. Having flipped the board upside down, this is the underside now, I'm going to glue and screw these 3 pieces in so that they will hold the supports for the work rest, and I'm just going to top it off with a small plywood plate here. So this is just, again, some MDF, some laminated MDF actually, which is probably going to glue okay. Hopefully it's going to glue okay directly onto these pine boards, but with the help of a few screws, we should be good to go. Here's the result, nice and dry the next morning. And what I found was the wood that I was using to support the tray, I actually think was cedar. This is from an old thing that I'd found and dismantled. So it was quite soft. It's very light, so it doesn't support. It's not a heavy weight, so which is very good. But it also allowed me to sand it down quite easily, so that then pushing them into the recesses there formed a really tight grip. So finally we're kind of almost good to go, and there's the drill being bolted into place. And just, again, simple process of sticking a couple of 10mm bolts, coach bolts through there. Let's see if I can get the nut onto the bolt and screw them down. And of course that's going to be the awkward point, I suppose. If I need to fix up the drill at all, I need to undo these bolts. But everything is dismantleable at this stage, which is kind of good. And I thought I'd throw in this for free, another piece of scrap. And I just use this just to slide over there, just in case it moves around a bit after many hours of use. I don't know, but that was just a precaution. It's just a piece of scrap wood which has been added to the bolt there. And here's the final thing. So you can see I'm just now fitting in the work rest, and that slots in quite nicely to within about 3mm of the sanding disc. And the sander is now impaled in its little tray. It's not going to move around. We can switch it on and sand away, and it works an absolute treat. So the only thing to finish this off now is to actually install an electrical extension with a switch on it. And when I put the switch on it, of course, then I can just switch it off and switch it on, rather than having to manually turn the drill on all the time. It's much better to have a switch on the outside of going on this trolley to get it to work well. And there it is in action. Works very well. How much did it cost? About $3 for the 2 bolts, and all the timber was just stuff that I've accumulated over the years.